The stars flickered, and then went dark as massive shapes blocked out their light. One by one, the Axiom ships appeared at the edge of human space, like ghosts becoming solid. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all perfectly arranged, in geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Each ship was made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. Captain Kim Gina stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the enemy fleet through the main view screen. Her coffee had gone cold in her hands an hour ago, but she hadn't noticed. The tactical officer next to her was quietly counting ships under his breath, but he kept losing track and starting over. The numbers were too big, too frightening. "Ma'am," whispered Lieutenant Park Hyun, the communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command." Gina nodded, without taking her eyes off the alien fleet. She had been expecting this call. Every human ship in the solar system would be getting the same message right now. The message that would tell them they were about to fight an enemy that had never lost a battle. The Axiom had been conquering star systems for 300 years. They moved from world to world like a plague, calculating every possible defense, every possible strategy their enemies might use. They had detailed files on 17 different species, all of them now extinct or enslaved. Their computers could predict how a battle would end before the first shot was fired. "Put it through," Gina said quietly. The face of Admiral Chen appeared on the screen. He looked older than when she had seen him last month. Much older. "Oh. Ships, this is Earth Command. We have confirmed contact with the Axiom Collective. Intelligence reports indicate they have superior numbers and technology. All vessels are to take defensive positions around Earth and Mars." Gina felt her heart sink. Defensive positions. That meant they were going to try to protect what they could and hope for the best. It meant they knew they couldn't win. "The enemy has given us 72 hours to surrender," Admiral Chen continued. "They say this is standard procedure. They say every species gets the same offer. Surrender now, and some of you will live as slaves. Fight, and everyone dies." The transmission ended. The bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Gina looked around at her crew. They were all young, most of them barely out of the academy. Park Han was 22 and had joined the Space Force because he wanted to explore new worlds. The tactical officer, Lee Min-ho, had a picture of his girlfriend taped to his console. The navigator, Choi Suna, had 3 kids. "Back on Earth?" "Ma'am," said Lee Min-ho, "the Axiom ships are moving into attack formation." Gina turned back to the view screen. The alien fleet was shifting, the crystal ships flowing like water into new patterns. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Each ship knew exactly where to go, exactly when to move. There was no confusion, no hesitation. They moved like parts of a single mind. "They're not like us," Gina said, more to herself than to her crew. "They don't make mistakes. They don't get scared or angry or desperate. They just calculate the best way to win, and then they do it." "Then how do we fight them?" asked Park Han. Gina was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her daughter back on Earth. She's probably sitting in school right now, learning about the history of human space exploration. She thought about all the messy, chaotic, wonderful things that made humans human. Their ability to love, to hope, to do stupid, brave things that made no sense. "I don't know," she said finally. "But we're going to try anyway." The Axiom ships continued their perfect dance in the darkness of space. Their artificial intelligences were already calculating the coming battle, running through millions of scenarios, predicting every possible human response. They had studied human military history, analyzed every great battle, every famous strategy. They knew about Napoleon and Nelson, about Alexander and Caesar. They had wargamed every possible tactic humans might use. What they didn't know was that humans had never been very good at following the rules. They didn't know that when faced with impossible odds, humans had a habit of doing impossible things. They didn't know that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. "All ships prepare for battle," Gina said into her communicator. "We may not win this fight, but we're going to show them what humans are made of." The Axiom fleet finished forming their attack pattern. According to their calculations, the battle would be over in 6 hours. The humans would put up a brave fight, but bravery without logic was just another word for suicide. The outcome was inevitable. They were about to learn that humans had never been very good at accepting the inevitable either. The first wave of Axiom ships swept through Earth's outer defenses like a knife through paper. Captain Park Minho watched. From the bridge of his destroyer, as the orbital stations exploded one by one, their shields useless against the alien weapons. The crystal ships moved with deadly precision, each shot calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. "Shields down to 30%, reported his tactical officer. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Park nodded grimly. His ship, the Soul, was one of the smaller vessels in the human fleet. It had been built for escort duty, not for fighting massive alien warships. The Axiom had already identified it as a minor threat, and were mostly ignoring it in favor of the larger battleships. For 6 hours, the battle went exactly as the aliens had predicted. The human fleet fought bravely, using every tactic they had learned in military school. They formed defensive lines, concentrated their fire on single targets, and tried to protect their larger ships. It was all very logical, very professional, and completely useless. The Axiom ships barely seemed to notice the human attacks. Their shields absorbed the damage while their return fire systematically destroyed ship after ship. The alien fleet moved like a school of fish, turning and striking. As one, there was no wasted movement, no confusion, no mistakes. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kim So-man, the navigation officer, "we're receiving new orders from Admiral Chen. All remaining ships are to fall back to Mars orbit." Park looked at the tactical display. Half the human fleet was already gone. Survivors were damaged and running out of ammunition. The retreat made sense. It was the logical thing to do. "Sir," Kim So-man asked when Park didn't respond. Park stared at the enemy formation on his screen. The Axiom flagship was in the center, a massive crystal structure that pulsed with inner light. It was beautiful and terrible, like a work of art designed to kill. The alien computers had calculated every possible human response, planned for every strategy the humans might use. But what if humans stopped being logical? "Belay that order," Park said quietly. "All stop. Prepare for full acceleration toward the enemy flagship." His crew stared at him. Lieutenant Kim So-man's mouth fell open. "Sir, that's suicide. Our weapons can't penetrate their shields." "I know," Park said. He thought of his wife back on Earth, probably watching the news reports of the battle. He thought of his son, who wanted to be a starship captain just like his father. "Engineering, I need you to overload the reactor. Safety protocols. Off." "Captain," said the chief engineer over the comm, "if we do that, we have maybe 10 minutes before the whole ship goes up." "That's all I need," Park said. He turned to his crew. "Anyone who wants to leave, take the escape pods now." "Wait, I won't order. You two stay." Nobody moved. Kim So-man straightened in her chair. "Where are we going, sir?" Park smiled. "Right into the middle of them." The Soul broke formation and accelerated toward the Axiom fleet. The alien ships immediately noticed the change. Their computers calculated the destroyer's trajectory and identified it as a desperate ramming attack on the flagship. The prediction was that the small ship would be destroyed long before it could reach its target. The Axiom were right about one thing: it was desperate, but they were wrong about the target. Park watched as the enemy ships turned their weapons toward his vessel. Laser beams and particle streams reached out to destroy the Soul. But Park had spent 20 years flying through asteroid fields and solar storms. He knew how to make a ship dance. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Random pattern. Don't let them predict where we're going." The Soul twisted and spun through space, dodging the alien fire by pure instinct rather than any tactical plan. The Axiom computers struggled to calculate the ship's next move because there was no logic to it. Park was flying by feel, making decisions based on gut instinct and 20 years of experience. 2 minutes to reactor overload, reported the engineer. Park could see the enemy formation growing larger on the screen. The crystal ships were beginning to close ranks, trying to block his approach to the flagship. But Park wasn't heading for the flagship anymore. He was aiming for the empty space right in the center of their formation. "All hands brace for impact," Park announced over the ship's intercom. It's been an honor serving with you. Doc. The soul plunged into the heart of the Axiom fleet like a spear. The alien ships tried to destroy it, but they were too close together to use their heavy weapons without hitting each other. For the first time in the battle, their perfect coordination worked against them. Reactor critical, called the engineer. 10 seconds. Park closed his eyes and thought of home. Now, the soul exploded in a ball of white light. The reactor overload created a massive electromagnetic pulse that spread out in all directions. The Axiom ships, with their sensitive crystal technology, were suddenly blind and deaf. Their perfect coordination shattered as their communication. Systems failed. In that moment of chaos, the retreating human fleet turned around and attacked. They came in from all directions, ignoring military doctrine, using tactics that made no sense. Some ships flew in spirals, others attacked upside down. Captain Lee Gina led a group of fighters in a pattern that looked like an ancient war dance. The Axiom computers tried to process what was happening, but humans had stopped following the rules. They were fighting with their hearts instead of their heads. And the alien, artificial intelligences had no idea how to respond to that. News of Captain Park Min-ho's sacrifice spread across human space faster than the Axiom fleet could advance. On Mars, in the mining stations of the asteroid belt, and in the outer colonies, people watched the battle footage with growing amazement. A single destroyed ship had broken the enemy's perfect formation. If one desperate captain could do that, what could thousands of humans do? Lee Suna was just a mining engineer on Mars Station 7 when the news arrived. She had spent 15 years operating fusion torches, the massive tools used to cut through asteroid rock. The torches were designed to be safe, reliable, and predictable. But as she watched the alien ships advancing toward Mars, Suna realized that safe and predictable might not be enough. "We need to evacuate," said her supervisor, Park Dae-ho. "The military says civilians should get to the emergency shelters." Suna looked out the station window at the red planet below. Somewhere down there, her 2 children were probably scared and confused, wondering why their mother had to work late again. The Axiom fleet would reach Mars in less than a day. Shelters might protect people from the first attack, but what happened after that? "No," Suna said quietly. "We're not running." She walked over to her fusion torch and started disconnecting the safety systems. The torch was designed to cut through rock with a controlled beam of superheated plasma. But what if the beam wasn't controlled? What if instead of cutting slowly and carefully, it exploded all at once? "Suna, what are you doing?" Park Dae-ho asked, looking nervous. "Making a weapon," she said, pulling out circuit boards and rewiring. "Connections? Help me move this to the docking bay." "It's insane. You'll blow up the whole station." "Only if I do it wrong," Suna said. She had been working with fusion technology since she was 20. She knew exactly how much power the torch could handle before it became dangerous. The trick was to make it dangerous on purpose. It took her 3 hours to modify the fusion torch. When she was done, it looked like a crude cannon mounted on a mining cart. The safety systems were gone, the cooling units were bypassed, and the power regulator was set to maximum. One shot would probably destroy the weapon, but that one shot would be worth a dozen military lasers. Tested on that old asteroid, she told her crew. They aimed the modified torch at a piece of space rock floating near the station. Suna held her breath and pressed the trigger. The torch fired a beam of plasma so bright it hurt to look at. The asteroid didn't just break apart, it vaporized completely. "Send the plans to Earth," Suna said. "Send them to everyone." Within hours, the blueprints for Suna's weapon were spreading through human communication networks. Mining stations, cargo ships, and even passenger liners started modifying their equipment. The Axiom computers detected the increased activity but dismissed it as unimportant. Civilians were not soldiers. They had no military training, no tactical knowledge. They posed no threat. The aliens were about to learn how wrong they could be. On Europa Station, janitor Kim Jun-ho had been mopping floors for 20 years. He knew every pipe, every cable, and every ventilation shaft in the facility. When the Axiom ships arrived in the Jupiter system, Jun-ho didn't run to the shelters. Instead, he went to the maintenance tunnels and started setting traps. The aliens had studied human military bases, but they had never bothered to learn about the people who cleaned them. Junho knew that the main computer core was protected by sensors and force fields, but the cleaning robots went there every day through service tunnels. If cleaning robots could get in, so could bombs made from cleaning supplies. Dr. Choi Minji was a botanist on one of the agricultural stations. She'd spent her career studying plant growth and soil chemistry, and the Axiom fleet attacked her station. She didn't have any weapons, but she did have a greenhouse full of experimental plants and a deep knowledge of organic chemistry. The aliens breathed a different atmosphere than humans, but they still needed to process air for their crystal technology. Mingi released genetically modified spores into the station's air system. The spores were harmless to humans, but would clog the sensitive filters the Axiom used for their equipment. All across human space, ordinary people were becoming extraordinary. Teachers turned their classrooms into command centers. Mechanics transformed civilian ships into fighting vessels. Farmers used their knowledge of chemistry to create explosives from fertilizer. The Axiom fleet found itself fighting an enemy that didn't exist in their databases. Every human installation they attacked fought back with weapons that had been invented hours earlier. Mining lasers, construction equipment, even coffee makers were being turned into instruments of war. "This is impossible," the Axiom field commander reported to the fleet. "The humans are using technologies we have never seen. Our tactical computers cannot predict their actions. To analyze and adapt," came the reply from the flagship. "Calculate new strategies." But how could they calculate strategies for weapons that were being invented faster than they could be cataloged? How could they predict the actions of an enemy that seemed to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic? The Axiom had conquered 17 star systems by being perfect. They had never faced an enemy that was perfectly imperfect, that thrived on chaos and improvisation. They were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous opponent was one that didn't know they were supposed to lose. The Axiom command ship hung in space like a frozen waterfall, its crystal structure pulsing with cold light. Colonel Choi. Daeho pressed his face against the small window of the boarding pod and watched the alien vessel grow larger. In 10 minutes, his team would be inside that ship, fighting creatures that had never lost a battle. Remember, he told his soldiers? Over the come, these things think like computers. They expect us to follow the rules, so we're going to break every rule we can think of. The boarding pod slammed into the Axiom ship's hull with a metallic crash. Cutting tools activated automatically, slicing through the crystal wall like it was made of ice. Daeho could hear the aliens moving on the other side, their footsteps making strange chiming sounds against the floor. Breach in 30 seconds, reported Sergeant Kimnari. Daeho looked at his team. They were all young Marines, most of them barely out of training. They had modern weapons and good armor, but they were still human. The Axiom had technology that was hundreds of years ahead of anything humans had built. "Sir," said privately, "Juno, what if their weapons are too strong for our armor?" Daeho smiled. "Then we'll just have to be too crazy for their computers." The cutting tools finished their work, and the whole section fell away with a crash. Beyond the opening lay a corridor that looked like the inside of a giant crystal. Walls glowed with soft blue light, and the air hummed with electronic sounds. "Move out," Daeho ordered. The Marines poured through the opening and into the alien ship. Almost immediately, they came under fire from Axiom defenders. The aliens moved, with mechanical precision, their crystal bodies reflecting the light of their energy weapons. They took cover behind doorways and shot at the humans with calculated accuracy. For the first few minutes, the battle went exactly as the Axiom computers had predicted. The Marines took cover, returned fire, and slowly advanced down the corridor. It was standard military procedure, the kind of fight the aliens had analyzed 1,000 times. Then Daeho did something that made no sense at all. "Ararang Ararayo," he sang at the top of his voice. It was an old Korean folk song, one his grandmother had taught him as a child. As the melody echoed through the crystal corridors, bouncing off the walls and mixing with the sound of gunfire. His Marines stared at him for a moment, thinking their colonel had lost his mind. Then Sergeant Kimnari joined in, her voice adding harmony to the song. One by one, the other soldiers began to sing as well. The effect on the Axiom was immediate and confusing. Their audio sensors, designed to track enemy movements by sound, were suddenly overwhelmed by the human voices. The aliens' communication system, which relied on high-frequency signals, was disrupted by the music. Their perfect coordination began to break down. What are they doing? One Axiom warrior asked another through their mental link. Unknown came the reply. The sounds serve no tactical purpose. They are wasting energy on meaningless noise. But the sounds weren't meaningless. As the Marines sang, they began to move differently. The music gave them rhythm, helped them coordinate their movements without using radio communications. When Deho sang a high note, his team knew to advance. When the melody dropped, they took cover. The Axiom computers tried to analyze the pattern, but there was no logic to it. The humans were fighting to the beat of an ancient song using musical cues instead of military signals. Their movements looked more like a dance than a battle. Charge on the chorus, Deho called out, and his Marines rushed forward just as the song reached its most powerful moment. The Axiom defenders, still trying to process what was happening, were caught off guard. The battle moved deeper into the ship. In the main corridor, the Marines encountered a group of Axiom warriors who had formed a perfect defensive line. The aliens fired in sequence, each shot calculated to provide maximum coverage while conserving ammunition. Form up and return fire would have been the logical response. Instead, Deho had his team spread out in a pattern that looked like flower petals, with each Marine spinning and moving to a different part of the old song. The Axiom's targeting computers couldn't predict where the humans would be next, because the humans were following music instead of military doctrine. Private, Juno found himself face to face with an Axiom warrior in a side corridor. The alien raised its weapon, but Juno started singing a different song, a lullaby his mother had sung to him. The soft melody confused the Axiom's audio sensors, and in that moment of hesitation, Juno was able to strike. Throughout the ship, the pattern repeated. Human pilots outside were flying their fighters in spirals and loops that looked like ancient war dances. The Axiom defense systems, programmed to counter logical flight patterns, couldn't track ships that moved like birds or butterflies. This is impossible, the Axiom fleet commander reported to the Central Intelligence. The humans are using tactics that violate every principle of warfare. Their actions make no mathematical sense. Adapt, came the cold reply. Calculate new responses. But how could they calculate responses to an enemy that fought with their hearts instead of their heads? How could they predict the actions of soldiers who used songs instead of signals, who danced instead of march? The Axiom's perfect war machine was beginning to crack, and the cracks were spreading fast. Admiral Kim Jina stood on the bridge of the rebuilt human flagship, watching the stars through the main view screen. 3 months had passed since the Axiom first appeared, 3 months since they had declared that humanity would fall within 72 hours. The alien fleet still hung in space nearby, but something had changed. Their perfect formations were broken, their crystal ships scattered and damaged. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Park Hyun, "we're receiving a transmission from the Axiom flagship." Gina nodded. She had been expecting this call. For weeks, the alien attacks had been getting weaker, more desperate. Their perfect coordination was gone, replaced by confusion and hesitation.
Axiom.
Computers that had conquered 17 star systems were finally breaking down. "Put it through," she said. The image that appeared on the screen was unlike anything humans had seen before. Axiom. Commander was a tall, crystalline being that seemed to be made of living glass. Its face showed no emotion, but there was something different about its posture, something that looked almost like exhaustion. "Humans," the alien said, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We wish to communicate." Gina felt her heart racing. This was the first time the Axiom had spoken to humans as equals, rather than giving orders. "We're listening." "Our calculations were incorrect," the alien continued. "We analyzed your military capabilities, your technology, your strategic doctrines. We predicted total victory within 72 hours. That was ... 93 days ago. Around the bridge, the human crew exchanged glances. They had all lived through those 93 days, fighting with whatever weapons they could find, using tactics that made no sense to anyone except other humans. "We do not understand," the Axiom commander said. "Your ships are inferior. Your weapons are primitive. Your strategies violate every principle of warfare. By all logical calculations, you should have been defeated within hours." Gina smiled. "Maybe that's your problem. You tried to calculate us." The alien's head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been confusion. "We have conquered 17 star systems. We have never encountered resistance that lasted more than 6 days. Our artificial intelligences have analyzed every possible form of warfare." "But you never fought humans before," Gina said. "You've studied our military history, our battle tactics, our weapons technology, but you never studied what makes us human." On the view screen, the Axiom commander was silent for a long moment. Behind it, Gina could see other crystalline beings, moving around what looked like a bridge made of living crystal. They all moved with the same mechanical precision. But there was something different now, something that looked almost like uncertainty. "Explain," the alien said finally, Gina thought. "About the past 3 months." She remembered Captain Park Minho, who had destroyed his own ship to save others. She remembered Engineer Lee Suna, who had turned mining equipment into weapons. She remembered Colonel Choi Daeho, who had led his Marines into battle while singing folk songs. "We don't fight because we're logical," she said. "We fight because we love. We love our families, our friends, our stupid little planet with its messy politics and terrible weather. When you threaten what we love, we don't calculate the odds. We just fight." Axiom Commander's crystalline face showed no expression, but its posture shifted slightly. "Love is inefficient. It causes beings to make irrational decisions, to waste resources on meaningless gestures, like singing while fighting," Gina asked. "Like turning farming equipment into weapons? Like ramming a destroyer into the middle of your fleet?" "Yes," the alien said. "These actions serve no tactical purpose. They serve a human purpose," Gina said. "They remind us who we are, what we're fighting for. They turn ordinary people into heroes, cowards into warriors, janitors into soldiers." The alien was quiet again. In the background, Gina could see the other Axiom beings consulting their computers, their crystalline forms flickering with internal light as they processed data. "Our computers cannot predict your actions," the alien said finally. "Every strategy we develop, you counter with something that makes no logical sense. Our perfect formations are broken by pilots who fly like they are dancing. Our superior technology is defeated by weapons built from spare parts and desperation." "That's because you're trying to fight a war," Gina said. "We're trying to protect our home." The transmission was quiet for a long moment. Then the Axiom commander spoke again, and for the first time, its voice sounded almost ... tired. "We withdraw," it said. "Our fleet will depart your space. You will not return." "Why?" Gina asked. "You still have more ships than we do. Your technology is still better than ours." The alien's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. "Because we have learned something our computers cannot process. Perfection is not strength when faced with an enemy that thrives on imperfection. We are too perfect to defeat an enemy that fights with chaos, love, and the refusal to accept defeat." The transmission ended. Over the next few hours, the Axiom fleet slowly gathered itself and moved away from human space. Their perfect formations were gone, replaced by a loose group of damaged ships limping toward the stars. Gina watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. The war was over, but the cost had been enormous. Yet humanity had survived, not because they were perfect, but because they were perfectly human. The stars reclaimed their peaceful silence, and Earth was safe once more.